Welcome, everyone, to our Zoogla Fireside Chat with Andrew Lee. I'm super excited for everyone here to meet him. He's a personal friend who has this awesome role now as an entrepreneur in residence at Andreessen Horowitz. He's running their Speed Run program, which they recently launched. And when this was recorded and live amongst an audience, it's about 2 more days to apply before the deadline. So that's why we want to get it right in to the hands of all of you to see this, but also for people who are live to ask them any questions regarding that. When I look at Andrew's background, we serve on an advisory board together. He has the resume that I wish I was able to be smart enough to work on all these different things, whether it's working in the White House, helping small businesses, working in product in the best gaming companies in our generation. He also had spent some time at Facebook. He worked at an awesome VC called Initialized Capital, and now he's over at Andreessen Horowitz as an entrepreneur in residence. So without further ado, Andrew, please tell us what you do and give us some background on Speedrun, and then we can go into Q&A. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I just appreciate everyone who's a Zoogler. I've not only invested in a number of Zooglers, my wife is currently over at Verily right now, an Alphabet company. So I've benefited from not only your cafeterias, but obviously I've seen them change over the past decade. It's just such a pleasure to be with you both. With everyone here. I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Andreessen Horowitz, and I was brought in primarily to work on the Speedrun program. I'm going to go and quickly post something within the chat, but later on for folks who are seeing this over recording, we'll send this out as well so you can read up a little bit more about it. But this was sort of the announcement about Speedrun itself. But let me go ahead and share some slides really quickly. But I want to keep this conversational so that we can kind of talk about all the things that everyone is effectively interested in. Here are some quick stats as to generally what's kind of going on in the world of Speedrun. And also, I want to keep this conversational primarily because the deadline is coming up this upcoming Friday. And we're just so excited to go ahead and share this with a lot of folks. So let me go and share my screen really quickly. And let me make sure, can folks see this? They should be able to. Okay, great. So let me just back up and we can talk about the world of gaming, right? So a lot of folks will tell you that if you are a developer or you're a person who's technical, many times the very first touch point that you have with the world of code is because you primarily played a game, right? There's something that was interesting. You wanted to go and implement that. Elon Musk was one of those individuals. Like, he actually learned to code because he wanted to go, he was playing a game. And we think that a lot of folks out there want to engage in the creative part of their mind as well as the technical part of their minds. And we wanted to make it so that gaming, this sort of like monolithic industry, is much more accessible to a lot of folks. And that's the reason why we created a startup school for gaming. So let me just tell you a little bit more myself super quickly. I founded a company called Jamlich in 2008. It was like Guitar Hero Online. We were like CNET WebWare 100. We had a bunch of growth. We were acquired by Zynga. I was absorbed into Farmville prior to the IPO, and I worked on that particular program. I was played by 1 every 10 people in the United States. Later on, members of my team went to go work for Stripe, SurveyMonkey, Facebook, a number of different places. And we made a lot of mistakes, right? We tried to do music gaming, which is like a category or a genre called rhythm-based music games. And we really wanted to do music. Turns out that's not a great idea, especially if you want to do full-length music, right? There's a lot of licensing concerns. There's things that you wouldn't know. And we didn't know these things when we first started out. We just started growing 20% month over month, and we had no idea what we were doing most of the time. To be fair, we were coming out of college after making our first company, which was a fantasy sports company that instead of drafting sports people, you would actually draft members of Congress. That was just our first sort of like fun game that we did out of our dorm rooms. We joined sort of the Facebook platform a little bit late. We probably could have done a little bit better in mobile. And at the time, there were not a lot of game investors, right? They weren't current, or not a number of them were non-existent around that time. But since that period of time, in the decade and 15 years hence, I've learned as both a 2-time founder, both having done my second startup in the world of AI, as well as having been a partner at Initialized Capital, that I've worked with 27 early stage companies. I've established basically more than $1 billion of follow-on fundraising, and you've advised a lot of founders. And you just notice that there's a lot of really important pieces of advice that you could give a founder early on that would just really change or inflect their trajectory. So as a result of that, we created Speedrun. So some key dates to know about Speedrun. And again, it's a gaming startup school. And the idea behind it is Andreessen Horowitz was really interested in this because we have a fledgling new games fund, one of the largest and probably best of its type. We've backed a number of companies all the way from the Web3 world, all the way to very solid sort of gaming studios that come from people who are veterans within the gaming industry, as well as we're also very interested in, take for example, a lot of gaming infrastructure or gaming tools companies that serve the gaming industry. People don't realize this, but the gaming industry is multi-billions of dollars. I'm sure a number of you have, at least somebody has probably seen The Last of Us. Most recently, if you've been under a rock, The Last of Us has had some of the biggest debuts in terms as an HBO adaptation. And we're seeing that basically gaming is really the tip of the spear for most culture. So as a result of that, we think that those who go into gaming will determine probably the future of the future of consumer entertainment. So the key dates are basically this upcoming Friday at 8 p.m. is when you submit your application. The application is very easy to do. It is less than 12 questions. It's literally 11 questions. It takes, I can tell you the average time that it takes. It takes about 20 minutes for people to go and fill it out. And from there, we might ask you some additional questions, but the next step after that is we will schedule some interviews with you and you get to go and be part of Speedrun. And those interviews will actually occur the week after, meaning next week. And then effectively what happens is Speedrun is primarily a very first inaugural program for us. So it's only going to happen for the month of May. And it starts out with an SF kickoff. We will fly you in from wherever you are to San Francisco to go ahead and attend the kickoff, where you'll meet the members of your cohort and be able to meet some really amazing speakers. And you'll then engage in a hybrid environment where you'll have one-on-ones and group office hours to go and help you get to the next stage with your gaming startup. And then you also have talks with gaming luminaries and speakers, which I'll talk about next. And then at the very end of it, the end of the month, after this quick speed run, is on June 5th to the 9th is LA Tech Week. We'll fly you there as well. And you will then be able to go and demo in front of an invite-only crowd of gaming investors, as well as be invited to a very marquee event that A16Z Games is doing with 100 Thieves, which I don't know if folks are into Twitch streaming or know about the world of sort of luminaries and creators, but you get to meet folks from 100 Thieves, which are important sort of esports / gaming organization. Just to name a few speakers, but I put it within the in the link already. But we have individuals who were former executives over at Discord, former founders of very important companies like Kongregate, Zynga, former CEO of Twitch, as well as we have a number of individuals who've been early on or worked on important games. Take for example, Supercell, Diablo 4, Riot Games, like one of the folks who actually was the I would say probably the most important person in the launch of Valorant, for example. We have all these individuals ready to go ahead and provide luminary discussions, as well as provide one-on-one guidance and office hours where need be. But you're going to be you're going to get a good sense of being supported by the A16Z Games team. And the whole point behind it is for a lot of folks who are interested in the gaming world, a big question for them is sort of like, does this fit me? What do I need to know about gaming? Having been in the world of gaming, we have a number of modules, and the things that we're going to talk about are the following. And I made this really quickly because we actually have a significant number of applications that we didn't expect to have. So I've been spending a lot of my time dealing with that, but I'm making a specific amount of time because I want to go and hang out with Zooglers, because obviously people who are orthogonal thinkers, people who are creative in their own rights, especially if they've come from Google, are people who we want to go ahead and help innovate the gaming industry. So some quick topics that you're going to be learning about. What is the business of a gaming startup? Like, how does it generally work? Like most of the time you're probably a consumer and you're like, well, okay, there's a PC game. How much does that generally cost? I guess like I can go buy something. I have to buy an Xbox or I have to buy a PlayStation in order to be able to do that. Like what is actually the business model that is primarily used by a lot of games? What's the building of a game and the launching of it? In particular, how do you build from the perspective of like good engineering practices? Because it takes a little bit longer than usual to go and build a game. Also, how do you launch that game? It's a little different than, take for example, how you typically would, take for example, launch a website, right? It's very community driven sometimes. There's a lot of creator partnerships that you might want to do. And we have experts within our company to go ahead, within A16Z Games, that will help out with that. But in addition to that, we also do things such as, what's it like to go and hire your team? And we all know this from the perspective of good people operations. The very first number of founders that you have, or the first members within your team, are pretty important to how it's going to go ahead and develop. And then obviously some important topics such as live operations, because in the world of gaming, it isn't just that you make something and you're done with it. Most of the time, it's very much like, hey, how do you upkeep it? How do you make sure you protect your sanity? How do you protect yourself from burnout? And then how do you also think through both the trends that are out there, navigating trends, and then how do you also fundraise at the end, right? And that's an important part because we're interested in ambitious founders, people who are interested in being leaders within the gaming industry and who are interested in being both creative, but also at the same time can sort of be the founders that we're effectively looking for. So, and at the very end, if this isn't for you, the other thing you do is you can refer a friend. And if you refer a friend, you can get a limited edition mechanical keyboard. This is like the hottest thing out there right now. But you can get a mechanical keyboard that is exclusive to A16Z games. It's obviously we should put a game mechanic on our own application. So this is what we did. But that's just a little bit to go ahead and describe a little bit about the program itself. But I'm happy to open up for questions. But that's a little bit about what's going on with Speedrun. So let me go ahead and stop sharing here and just open up for questions and tell you a little bit about. And the easy way to go and refer somebody is I'm going to go and post within the chat this is that is the link, and all you do is you just send them the link. They fill it out, and there's a little referral section down at the bottom that they can go ahead and fill out too. So I'm happy to go ahead and talk about all the things that folks are interested in, as well as happy to answer questions about like, hey, what are the trends you're interested in? What are the sectors that we're interested in? One thing I didn't mention was we are interested in not just something that is, take for example, already done. We're actually quite interested in sort of newer markets, whether it's been the world of, take for example, Web3 or blockchain. If you're trying to do a newer sort of gaming studio, whether it's AI enabled or not. We're also interested in UGC or mods. That means like if folks have ever played like Minecraft or Roblox, building games on top of those programs is really interesting to us. But in addition to that, we're also interested in tools as well as infrastructure. So a lot of folks don't know this, but the gaming industry is multi-billions. And for some reason, having worked in the gaming industry, and I'm sure people who can sort of like feel this, but many times gaming startups choose not to ever use off-the-shelf software. And the reason why, or use areas of the stack, and the reason why is because many times they just build it themselves in-house. But we personally think that that's as a result of the long development cycles. We think that because of the combination of AI and being able to go ahead and create other tools for the gaming industry, development cycles should be shorter. And because if we can make development cycles shorter, that's actually a good thing for the gaming industry. That primarily means that if you can make gaming cycles shorter, it means that then you would have better games, you'd be able to have deeper connections with your community. And then not only that, but if you make gaming development cycles shorter, that means that you can actually create better software so you don't burn out a number of the engineers within some of these companies. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing with Speedrun. But again, it's very easy. It takes you literally within this call, you could fill it out right now. And at the end of this call, you would be done. Or at the end of the Zoom, you would be done with your actual application. And feel free, if any folks have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But obviously, I'm going to turn it back to Chris so we can make this a discussion and be able to answer a number of questions.
Sure. Let's have folks raise their hand, and I'll just call them out one by one. But Andrew, why don't I ask a couple of some key questions I had as you were.
Yeah.
How early do you want someone to be applying? But also, how late? Is this program just for super early people brainstorming, or if people have launched a gaming startup or in one of those categories you mentioned, they should still apply as individuals? And the follow-up question to that is, do you take equity, or what's the model potentially? Could you share?
Yeah, so for right now, here's the great part about the inaugural run. We did this primarily because we wanted to help out the community. So we're taking, there is no, right now it's just primarily content. Like we're literally giving you a free flight. We're going to give you a bunch of content. We're going to primarily do this because we want to see what it's like to see if we can have the target, which is first-time founders. We're very interested in folks who are first-time founders in the gaming world. And the other thing that's interesting is you asked about stage, right? What if you only have an idea, for example? We are interested in talking to those folks who just have an idea, maybe that's like them and a co-founder, and they're just like, hey, we're interested in doing this. We don't know a lot about gaming. Are we a fit? You're definitely a fit for Speedrun. If you're also a gaming company and you've already had a game or you already have something within the market and you're just trying to unlock that next stage, you might also be a fit for us. The reason why is because there's going to be a demo. We're going to introduce you to our network of investors. So that makes a lot of sense, especially if, say, for example, you've gotten a couple pilots or you don't have any pilot customers, you've identified some things, but you really need another unlock within, take, for example, gaming tools, for example. we're here to go and help you with that as well, because A16Z Games, and I'll post it in as well. We have a very large portfolio of gaming companies who are interested in looking for example, for generative AI companies, for example, to help them figure out, hey, how can I make my development cycle a lot faster?
Awesome. Carlos, why don't we get Julia to clarify any questions she may have, and then we'll go to you. Julia, do you want to see whether any clarification questions based on what you posted?
This was really helpful. That was my exact question off the bat. And to follow up on that, I was wondering, are you looking for pre-demo? What kind of team size are you looking for? Because for the application, it looked more like more mature teams, bigger teams. I just wanted some clarity on that.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I try to make the application as simple as possible, so it's just like one person could just fill it out. But yeah, for us, I think the thing is, we're fine with anything early, right? The idea very much is like first-time founders. Ideally, we would like you to have probably a co-founder, because it's just a lonely world. I've started startups in the past. It's just super lonely if you're alone and just doing it yourself. But also at the same time, we're just more interested in being able to help educate and teach you more about the gaming sector. And that's the thing that we care a lot about.
Great. Carlos, why don't you go, and then Robert can go next. Carlos.
Sure. Hi, Andrew. So I have the team so far is myself and my co-founder, who's in marketing. I am in the tech. So we don't have a team for making a game right now, but what I can do is create like plugins for game engines to enhance other people's games with like more advanced sword combat immersion. So I was wondering if my team would be a good fit for this cool startup speedrun program that you have going on.
Yeah, so let me make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. So your team is you and a co-founder. You're primarily on the technical side. That other person's on the marketing side. Are you asking whether you're the right fit, or?
Yeah, because I know you mentioned. I think I read somewhere that you're looking for a team that could make a game. And also in this session that we're having, you're also very interested in tools to like make people more productive or to enhance the game. And I think that's what I can do. So even though at the moment my team and I can't make like a full game, we could definitely 100% like enhance like other people's games, especially when it comes to like sword combats.
Yeah. I mean, if we think about it, let me answer your question by example, right? So
sure.
There have been some amazing pivots in the world that relate to the world of gaming, right? One of the most popular ones is obviously Slack, which started out as a gaming company, then became Slack. Other companies include like Discord, which started as a gaming company and became Discord. But at the same time, there's also other companies that were more on the gaming tools and infrastructure side, right? So people don't know this. Unity, for example, was actually also started out as a gaming company. And the reason why I think it's important to for those who have some gaming experience, at least in the tools and infrastructure side, is because then you should have tried certain things and experience the problem, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't have talked to a lot of customers and then being able to go and make something that fits that particular sector. So I think, Carlos, apply. We'd be interested in kind of exploring what you're interested in doing. And if it's sort of like, hey, I'm not that interested in exploring this, but I'm interested in exploring that, Speedrun's the perfect place for you, because it's a gaming startup school. It's supposed to teach you all the stages to like the gaming lifecycle, for example.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Robert, why don't you ask your question?
Okay. So Andrew, thanks for coming to chat with all of us. One of the things you mentioned was Gen AI tools and other new off-the-shelf kits that you can use to help speed up developments. I've been thinking a lot about LLMs and Gen AI in general. As a gamer, as you know, we hate lag. And so with real-time inference, it might be a big blocker for adoption. So just wanted to see if there are ways that you guys have seen that might help. And I guess more broadly, what are the current engines that you see that are helpful out there? I know about Unity and Unreal, but has A16Z identified other new up-and-coming engines that folks should be thinking about?
Yeah, let me see if I can find. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can also find. We have a number of. We're one of the. We've actually led a lot of the writing in the world of gaming. So let me go ahead and send you over this this blog post that a number of my colleagues had created in terms of Gen AI. So this one's important. I'm going to paste it into the chat here. And this is pretty helpful. But in addition, so to answer your specific question about memory, right? People are gonna love this. Remember, sometimes like it's sometimes a bug, but it can be turned into a feature. And the reason why we all know this is because let me give you an example from the world of gaming. Okay, so Fortnite, I'm sure we all heard of Fortnite, right? Fortnite, PUBG, like these games that are about battle royales. And the idea is, you drop a bunch of people into a map, and then the map slowly shrinks. And then people get eliminated as time keeps on going on, and people get closer and closer, right? So the problem there is, if you think about it from like a gaming perspective, you're like, oh, it's so cool that at the end there's the last person standing. Now, that's what I call like a narrative theme that fits really well with a technical constraint. And the technical constraint is this: if you have 100 people synchronously shooting each other or fighting each other, it is really, really hard to make sure that race conditions occur at the right time, that you don't have something known as peaker's advantage, which is like individuals can go ahead and peek out and they have an advantage because of another person's lag or their internet connection, right? And companies like Valorant, for example, have great blogs on how they've been able to go and solve peaker's advantage, which was one of the most important things that they did when they launched Valorant in the very beginning. Now, the difference is that you realize that there's certain technical limitations that start to occur. So there's two ways to go and address this. I would say one way is to use narrative design. So for example, for Fortnite, it's like, oh, actually everybody's across the map and basically placed far apart from each other. So you won't have conditions where like 10 people are all grouped together and it's going to cause a bunch of lag, because they're all spread across in the map, and their collisions generally are like 2 to 3 people, and it continues to be around like 2, 3, max, maybe 6 people, right? And people don't realize that because they're playing it and they're like, oh, it's so much fun, I can go find people, et cetera. And then as you develop the game, tech gets better, more people can play, you can solve the synchronous, like the synchronous lag problem. So similarly, I think the thing is, unlike the world of technology sometimes where you have to try to make things really perfect, in consumer, especially with games, you can actually make it so it's part of narrative design and it's also part of the game design itself. And the funny thing is, if you look through all history in games, you realize that if you just looked at it from a technical constraint perspective, you realize that the games that did well were able to use the technical constraint as a means of game design, right? And then they were able to use game design as a means to work around the technical constraint. Now, to be fair, you could be John Carmack and like you do some crazy good stuff with like Doom and with Wolfenstein, and it turns out like you can actually move past those constraints and you find different ways to hack it, for example. But I think the idea behind Speedrun is to teach you sort of these questions, like whether it's the game design side, the narrative design side, whether it's also in terms of the systems design itself. And that's one of the interesting things is that when I was in the gaming industry, I realized that some of the top engineers out there worked in gaming. It's like really hard to do some of the stuff. You're trying to remake reality effectively, right? But also at the same time, some of the methods that they use were sometimes a little bit more backwards because it took them such a long time to go and develop that. Take, for example, they were still using like PHP 4 or something. And it was like, why are you using PHP 4? Oh, that's because when we started, like PHP 4 was like maybe the new hotness at the time. It wasn't even the new hotness. It was like standard, right? So there's something to be said about combining those two things together. Now, specifically for your Gen AI and LLM question, we actually have that. Plus, there's a new and updated sort of market map that we've done that one of my other partners, here we go. Here's where it is. Let me pull it up for you as well. It's on his Twitter post, but this is another market map that's pretty helpful too. So you're going to be working with a lot of these folks in Speedrun, and they'll be giving you the latest, and we'll be diving in there with you to help make sure that you can start use the latest tools that are out there. And then more importantly is it's very much possible that you might be making the tool. And then from that perspective, you would be then, having access to members of our portfolio.
Got it. That's super helpful. And thank you for the great answer. Can I ask one more question on Speedrun itself?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I see the value of the Speedrun. You're clearly very knowledgeable in the gaming industry, but can we get a little bit more details on how the program's structured? So am I thinking about it as like a shorter version of a YC badge? What's the demo day expectation? What happens at the end of it? So maybe talking through the mechanics of it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the important thing to realize here is there's 3 things that we tend to focus on. So I would describe Speedrun in the following ways. One is we're trying to create community. And then we're trying to give you access. And then we're also trying to make sure that you're getting education. So for each of those areas, we have programming that fits it. So every single week are 3 sort of things that fit that area. So the first is, if we're trying to give you education, we'll have practitioners from the gaming industry who will dive into a particular module, for example, live operations, and they'll go through a case where like, I've experienced this, how would you solve it? And then we all would talk about it over Zoom, right? The other is access, which is then how do you talk to luminaries as well as members of our network? You will get videos that are pre-recorded from luminaries, as well as you might actually get some synchronous ones, but it's a little harder because like, like Ilka, who founded Supercell, is going to do something, but he's like he's in Europe. So it's like crazy. It's like 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. our time in on Pacific time. But the idea there is that you get to be able to go and submit questions beforehand. You get to be able to go and have a conversation with an individual who has built a really important company, right? Clash Clans, like Brawl Stars, like really like someone who's actually done it. And the very last is community, which is then at that point, we want to try doing something related to sort of office hours or group office hours. And the reason why is because we want people to be able to create community with others who are of their own affinity. In particular, we think that infra and tools companies should obviously be together because it's hard to go ahead and sell to games companies, right? And we should all learn how to solve a lot of this. And this is us building in public, because I come from the startup world and I want to give back in that same way. I wouldn't say that, I don't know if we can be compared to YC, because I love YC. It's a great group of people. I'm very close with, I worked with Gary previously over at Initialized Capital. But obviously I think the thing is, if we could, provide something that fits very much the gaming industry, and it's very much possible that it turns out the things that we do are just different than what you might find at other organizations. A good example of this is we actually have a collegiate playtesting initiative where we work with colleges to playtest games. That is something that's very specific. That's probably not very useful to like a SaaS startup, because I don't know what college students ever want to do with a SaaS startup. But those are the types of like very verticalized things that we want to go and provide in Speedrun.
And maybe diving in a bit deeper, Andrew, for people, I know that the start and the end is going to be in California. In the middle of other specific hours, time of day, do you expect people to be available and to join, or how many hours or days?
Yeah. So the reason why we made it hybrid was because we knew that like people can be anywhere in the world and they could be very talented. Because we've seen it in the world of gaming, right? Like you see companies from Finland, you see companies from Vietnam, you see companies from every country do extremely well in the world of gaming. The key things are, the only synchronous thing is obviously the kickoff and then the demo day at the end. And then in the middle are sort of these case practitioner and group office hour sessions. The case practitioner session will be a live Zoom, but we're going to try working with, depending on our cohort, to try to make it as easy as possible for folks. And we want to accommodate in that regard. And then for the group office hours, we're going to work with your group mentors are going to be a combination of members of our operating team and members of our investment team who are experts within their own fields. They're going to help you kind of do the work to provide the sort of group office hours. I tend to call them group office hours, but they're actually like more like games therapy, because when you're going through a startup, you basically need therapy every week. But like that's when you can be able to go and talk through all of your individual problems. But then outside of that, then you watch your videos asynchronously. Like we want you to be able to spend time working on whatever you're working on, right? And to answer Robert's last question I think he was wondering about like, is there an expectation about demo day? There is sort of an expectation to the extent that like, you have an opportunity to present something and to be able to potentially raise money and be able to connect with not just that, but like partners and members of our network, right? People who you will establish a conversation with, both whether it's AAA studios, if you're trying to sell into them, or with individuals who are like publishers in very big areas. And we think that's a really important thing because that type of access, similar to other areas of like LA, we don't want that access to be limited. We want that to be open to people who will innovate the industry. And that's the reason why we're doing this. And we're just, the way I'd like to describe it is our members of our team are just like, we're just honored to work with people who are willing to take a chance to try to do something within the gaming industry, right? Like your dreams of providing fun and being able to solve the industry that basically provides a lot of fun. I don't think people quite realize gaming is, it's probably like, if you ask people, what's some of the most important IP out there, a lot of people will say like, oh, it's probably Disney. It's probably, maybe like Harry Potter or something like that. I would tell you that actually it's probably Nintendo. If you were to look at like how Nintendo has done. And then I would also tell you that everybody who has a good IP has tried to basically turn that into a game. So if you might have seen Harry Potter recently released their most recent game that did super well and smashed records for them for Warner Brothers.
Andrew, just following up from that, have you thought of what size of the cohort you're trying to curate, or does it really depend on application pool?
Yeah, a couple dozen. I mean, like when we first started, we're like, well, we should probably just start with 12, right? But it turns out like there's a lot of really good people out there, and we're just like, well, it probably would make sense to probably aim for like 36. Like if it's in the hundreds, that seems too much. Like that doesn't seem like we'll give personalized service for sure. But for us, we're thinking, probably around like probably max 50, probably less than that, because honestly, I need to do that for my sanity and my 5-month-old baby. But more importantly is just because we want to make sure that everybody else realizes that we're working for you, right? Like we want to make sure that everybody is getting sort of like the personalized service that they need. And that's important to us because we don't want it to feel like a conveyor belt, because we don't even know what the conveyor belt for early stage gaming would look like, right? Like we're here to learn from you and for you to learn from us.
Kabish.
Andrew, good to see you. We met during GDC. Awesome. So talking about community and access, one thing I would love, and the challenge I have faced in the last couple of the months is you have so many people actually applying, right? And not everyone will be a part of it. Can you put a group together so every founders can actually connect with others to find the like-minded people? And I'm sure like many people here are also looking for like a partner and whatnot. So would it be nice to have Andreessen putting something like a YC startup school where you can find the like-minded game founders together? Because I've been looking for like a couple of early hires and like, who is the one? But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we've thought about that just because like we just didn't expect such big. Let me go and paste my Twitter thread as well, where we just post a little bit of our initial, some of the initial stats. It's been pretty, we've been really pleasantly surprised by some of all the initial stats of what's been going on. And sort of the representation from all the different companies of people who've applied. This occurred within less than a week. So obviously things are changing even more. But that's just some of the sort of alumni or people from large gaming companies or just other places that are interested. They're not alone because obviously there are people who come from Google as well. But as we thought about it, we definitely think that there's opportunity to potentially help with matchmaking for people who are looking for other founders of like-mindedness, in terms of weaknesses and such. For right now, we want to focus on speedrun just to help, speedrun the gaming side. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to figure out like, where does this eventually go? So I hear you, Tabish, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. And this is just, I think this is just the beginning for us. So we'll see how it all turns out.
And go for it, Sam.
Yeah, thanks. I just have one question. So you mentioned a couple of the innovative new areas that you're looking for startups and founders. Are you prioritizing those areas above? Like, what if somebody just wants to make a game studio and just make games? So I'm curious if the as you're looking at applications, you're prioritizing like innovation in those new particular areas, or if just good, fun gameplay works as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think, so we definitely care about those particular areas. And the reason why is because I'm a believer that, every great surfer needs a great wave. But then more importantly is I also think it's important that within each of these, if you're going to do a game studio, right, and you're just going to start a game, but if you were to tell me, you're like, hey, I'm going to make League of Legends. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, how's it different from League of Legends? If you're just going to be like, I just want to make a copy of League of Legends, I'd be like, okay, well, that's going to be really hard because it already exists. Like you should probably find an edge or a wave of some sort that tends to help you in that regard. And I think that's the thing that we're kind of looking for. It isn't that we're definitely not against people who want to start games. In fact, that's the A Season Z Games Fund. Like we definitely want to see people start games. And we want to see people who are also, come from diverse backgrounds, have different narratives, like have all those different things. Like we're excited to go and see those. But it's also important to understand that you're going to have some edge in some way where it's like some insight or edge where it's like, hey, I've played this in the past. And I just think that what's really missing from this particular category is the following. And we'd want to talk to you about that. And that's how we tend to think about it. The other is then obviously a platform wave, which is like, I'm going to build on VR, AR. I'm going to build on UGC mods. I'm going to build in the world of Web3 and blockchain. And that's an interesting wave too, right? So you can either take, the platform and combine it with an existing game, or with a game edge, and then change how the game design might work, or the system design might work. And I think all of those areas are areas that we're interested in hearing. Most importantly is, I think that we're interested in meeting folks who, can ship and be able to learn quickly, all the things that I think a lot of folks have learned being at Google.
Let's go to Carlos, then we can get Julie to ask the questions. Carlos.
Hey, Andrew. It seemed like there was at least two types of groups you were interested in. One of them was game development groups that are ready to make a game, and also groups that can make game development tools. So I was wondering, with the speedrun program, would these two different groups experience like a different structure in the speedrun program?
So you're saying, we're looking for different types of, so all of those folks qualify. And the reason why is because there's individuals who might be further ahead in their gaming experience, or they may know what type of game they are going to make. And then there's obviously individuals who are fairly new to that world, whether it's like, I don't even know how the industry works, or I don't even know like generally the world of gaming. We are interested in hearing like why you're interested in doing this, and what you might be considering, what you're interested in doing. But all of these, that's the reason why it's a gaming startup school. It's not like it's like hey, you already have a company, a bunch of users, and we're going to help you get more users type of thing. That is possible for some of those folks, but we're much more interested in being able to teach people and having more new entrants, first-time founders in the gaming industry.
Oh, okay. Because it kind of seems like to me, it seems like there will be a structure like for game development teams to make a game from different talents coming together to make a game. And it kind of seems to me like there'll be a different structure as well for teams that are making like business to business tools, like game development tools. So like,
and that's, sorry, let me make an important point there, which is that we do have an infrastructure side. We'll have a separate infrastructure module / tool module for people who are doing B2B. And then for the primary focus for this one was primarily like, hey, we want to teach people how games are made. And then we thought to ourselves, like, well, if you're doing B2B and you're thinking like net revenue retention, those are specific things that we can provide on an combination ad hoc basis. But more importantly is that you still want to know how a game is made if you're doing B2B in the gaming industry, because if you don't know that, then you don't really know your customer very well, right? So that's the reason why our modules are primarily focused around that in particular.
Okay, yeah, and that'd be great to learn as well, even if I were to make the tools for it. But
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Thank you.
Julia, why don't you go and ask your question?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one you've kind of touched upon. So gaming is a very interesting combination of things. It's both about the technology and the platform that powers the gameplay, but it's also about the IP. So how much is your firm leaning in terms of the platform or the IP? Are you more interested in one or the other? And the second question is, because it's a very hits-based business, how do you identify a promising early stage gaming company?
Okay, so the first question is around, does IP or platform generally matter more? And the second is, how do we identify something that's promising, right? Okay, so this is like the age-old question. Did Harry Potter make it, or was it because like the easy accessibility to like Kindle or something? I would tend to say that for speedrun at the very least, we do think that when there are platform shifts, there are more great companies, impactful companies made, right? I think we can all agree that like when mobile came out, when the iPhone started getting a lot of users, right? A number of game companies just got a ton of folks, right? Whether it was Rovio with Angry Birds, right? And now it's like much more developed, right? Now it's harder to actually launch a great mobile game because like the cost of acquisition is a lot higher. So as a result of that, we think that like earlier platforms help sort of smooth out a little bit of the process for early teams. A number of the teams that did really well in mobile, in fact, were first-time founders. And that's what's really exciting. Now, at the same time, though, I do think that like really great IP needs to matter along with the same time that you have a platform shift. A good example of this is Minecraft. right? So Minecraft is, if lots of people would be like, why is this blocky thing so popular with 12-year-olds? Or like, why is this so popular with like 14-year-olds, right? And it turns out that like at the time, it was very hard to have a significant number of people crafting and doing things together on a server. It's just like really hard to do. And the easiest way to do that is to like make it very easy so there's low latency. So there's a platform shift that's occurring there. But at the same time, like it's so endearing when you see a blocky pig. And it has to be the right blend of the two. That's really important. I don't think, however, that it's necessary for a really great team to have like, hey, we got the license for Harry Potter. I would first be astounded that you got the license for Harry Potter. But if you did, I don't even know if that's going to really make sure that you're going to make a great game, because there's a lot of other things that are going to be necessary to make a great game. And that's why you should probably apply to speedrun. So then on the other side is this question, Julie had a great question, which is, how do you identify sort of like early indicators of success? So if you look at the A16Z Games portfolio, a number of the games companies that we've backed are experienced, not just experienced veterans, but we're talking about like some of the top people in their industry, right? People who have created games that are billions of dollars. And there are many ways that we can identify if those people are really great founders and they're going to create great games. But at the same time, there's this other side, which is the whole point of speedrun, is that we think there are a lot of diamonds in the rough, right? A lot of people who, if you see them beforehand, they can make really important games. And they're relatively like first-time founders. A good example of this is like, let's take Riot Games, right? So Mark Merrill and Brandon Beck, when they first started, they had played Dota, which was a mod of on top of Blizzard, right? On top of Warcraft. And they were like, this game is so much fun. I play a lot of it, but it really sucks. There's so many problems with it. There's a lot of cheating. There's a lot of this, like there's not good management. The way it's like balanced is really terrible. And like, no one cares about this. Like we care about it. We love this. And we really want to like put our heart and soul into it. And then they hired really great people. And I think that first-time founders, it turns out, can actually have very high variance, meaning they can be even more successful than people who are experienced. Because I think the thing is, and I'm sure a lot of other folks who've seen it, I'm sure you probably know people, especially coming from Google, who you're like, people just, you don't know what you don't know. If you're relatively new to an industry, you don't care what other people who are experienced in the industry have said. You're just going to try it out. And it turns out at the same time, the platform may have shifted under you, or it may have turned out that like IP has changed or something has changed that no one has really identified. But because you were relatively new and you did the thing that people didn't realize could actually work, you actually did it. And in the past, maybe a lot of people failed for a period of time. So all this is to say that usually it's a combination of the team, the product, the market, and it's a combination of both. But for us, at the very least, it is a necessary condition for a relatively new team to be able to be in a market where the wind is at your back and can be very beneficial.
Tandra, dialing in from Singapore.
Yeah, hi. Just wanted to ask Andrew. I just actually received this information a couple of days ago, so I don't have a team yet. And the deadline of application is 2 days from now. Can I still apply, or do I need to like rush to find a team in the next 2 days?
You can apply, Sean. It's fine. Like you can apply. And I think the key there is, we say we prefer teams just because, you're lonely and doing the thing for the first time. But at the same time, like we care about your background and your ability to have shown like, hey, I can actually like do something, right? So definitely apply. Don't not apply. But then more importantly is, at the same time, just understand that like we're there to go and help you with this. Like this is a tough question. A lot of folks, when they have, a single co-founder and they're alone and they're trying really hard, and it's like the second year of development, it is a lonely, dark place. And we've seen it, and we want to help you. And we're just like, look, it's important to make sure that you're there with friends along the journey or people that you trust, and that's really important.
Okay, great.
Maybe I'll expand that question, Andrew, but you've co-founded startups yourselves. You've advised a lot of solo founders. You invested in companies. Can you share more about how should someone find a co-founder and test a relationship before going into a startup together?
Yeah, the founder dating thing is a tough one because it's sort of like it's sort of like dating, like, which is also very awkward. My wife will tell you how awkward I was. And I think the thing is like the best way to probably describe it is you want to obviously find someone who shores up your weaknesses Especially if you're like, the simple ones are like, if you're very strategic, you want to find someone who's detail oriented and analytical. If you are technical, you might want someone who's also still technical, but potentially in different ways. Or if you're non-technical, definitely find someone who is technical. And then on the other side is thinking to yourself like, well, is there someone who's like biased toward action, but someone who's methodical, right? And it's hard because the thing is, we tend to actually find people who are very similar to ourselves, and that's fine too, right? If you have people who are very similar to yourself, that is helpful, but then just know that you have certain blind sides. I tend to tell people really two things that are helpful to find a co-founder. One is looking within 1 degree or 2 degrees, especially if you're from the Google network, right? That's an amazing like network in terms of the degrees of being able to find co-founders. It is an amazing proving ground for people who are great. And the easiest way to go and do that is find someone who you respect and admire. See if they'll join you. They probably won't, but then ask them, tell me someone who's similar to yourself or someone who you respect and admire and who you would be willing to go ahead and introduce me to. And then you just keep on doing that. And that's probably one of the best ways to do it. The other way to do it is much more methodical. A number of people go to like the co-founder dating sites and they kind of do that stuff. It's helpful, but then you really have to like answer a bunch of questions and make sure that all those questions help answer everything that you're potentially interested in. I don't know if that's right, because it's sort of like if you had a questionnaire for every person that you dated to find your future partner, is that the person? Will that actually prove to you what it's going to be like in a relationship? Many times not, because the thing is like the answers in a dating questionnaire are totally different from the ones from a relationship questionnaire. So the key is then trying to get yourself in the situation where it's actually a relationship. So I suggest doing game jams, hackathons, building something, open source projects, right? Working at a startup is also very helpful. And if you look at the A16Z Games portfolio, there's a ton of different gaming startups if you want to just kind of wet your feet there as well. But that's one way. I think it's the best way to go ahead and find whether you want to work with somebody.
Great. Carlos.
Yes. Would it be appropriate for me to apply to the speedrun program if I already applied to YC?
Yeah. So if you apply to Y Combinator, it does not prohibit you from joining speedrun. We don't take any equity. More importantly, I think with YC, they're fine as long as you abide by their terms. But in addition to that, it doesn't at all interrupt or intersect with their dates. By the time you're done with speedrun, since we're doing it so quickly, I don't even think you'll be done with your first interview. We might be in the interview stages. That's how fast we're doing this. I mean, because the deadline is this Friday, right? April 21st. Let me just say this again. April 21st. You would literally do the application right now on this call and be done with it. And then we have interviews next week, and then maybe a little bit the week after, but probably next week. We accept you. We fly you in on May 8th and 9th. And then you do your stuff for a whole month where you learn a ton. We jam as much information as you, and we help you as much as possible. And then the first or second week of June, whatever LA Tech Week is, you demo and you meet everybody. And then it's not over, right? Like you still have to make a company, and like that's your startup, and you're really interested in the world of gaming. But we're like really speedrunning this thing. Like how apropos of us that we're speedrunning the speedrun.
I got the right name. Cool, fantastic. Thank you.
And for those who don't know, speedrunning is, I hope people understand this, but speedrunning is basically, look up the like speedruns of Super Mario Brothers, all that stuff. Be really impressed by people who spend like years of their lives trying to speedrun like one game. And then you'll realize that like, this is the type of thing, why we chose the name, why it's so apropos.
Andrew, I know some people here are going to tell people about the session and as well as application. So do you have an age minimum to participate in the program?
I don't believe so. Now that I think about it, I don't think so. As long as I think you have to be like a person. You might have to go through a background check maybe, just to make sure like, you are who you say you are. But I don't think we do have an age minimum. I mean, it would be fascinating. I mean, like I've seen, great hackers who were at the age of 15 and 16. And obviously some really, really great companies have started by folks, especially in the world of gaming at such a young age. I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. I can get back to you on that one. But we're more interested in just the stuff that someone's built or their potential, honestly. because if you think about it, right? I mean, if you think of some of the best hackers out there, and like, you know, whether it's like Larry Page or Sergey Brin, you know, like they were doing stuff when they were super young.
Yep. No, even Dylan from Figma, right? He was super young.
Exactly.
in the Valley, and he may be underage if he implied when he first came out.
Yeah,
so.
and I think our perspective behind it is honestly, we're really interested in hearing from folks. My hope behind this call is just that there's a lot of people out there who think of the gaming industry as really unapproachable, and it makes sense. It is long development cycles. It's very insular in terms of its culture sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. It's built on technology, and it's built on it has people who are creative, who work really hard. And but people who come from technology don't see it as something that's easy for them to kind of step into. But it turns out it is. And I think that's helpful.
All right, so very quickly, we have Amin, Carlos, and I have my one final question. Amin.
This is a tangential question a little bit. So you have seen the technology for gaming, like for example, Unreal Engine 5. It's so realistic. So do you think that's going to lower the barrier for entry for making movies using gaming technology?
I mean, you've I don't know if you're hanging out, but that's my secret like 30-year plan, which is that I just think that like, what you want with the creative world is you want creativity to move at the speed of ideas, right? Like, just think of that world, right? Like, we imagine things in our minds, and we have friends who are the most imaginative people out there. You'd want to have those ideas just appear and gain traction and allow them to continue doing what they do. Storytellers, as many barriers that we can take away for storytellers to tell their stories, like, let's do that. So my dream is honestly that, and it's already happening, right? You already see it where, I don't know if maybe I'm the only person, but sometimes I will watch YouTube 6-hour like game walkthroughs. Like I would, because they're very entertaining. Like it's the whole movie, right? It's the movie of the game, of the actual game when someone's playing it. And this happens especially with a 5-month-old, but you know, these are things that are really interesting. And that's what I think is probably part of the future. And we're already seeing it with, you know, whether it's like Star Wars, you know, Princess Leia, people might, you know, from all the different movies that have kept the names and likenesses of different characters. It's only inevitable in that regard, but it's also an exciting time because you never know whether it's primarily an interactive medium or it might actually occur as a result of as things evolve, right? I mean, radio didn't really die, right? Radio just also evolved too. I listen to NPR on my phone by clicking a button, which is kind of odd.
Carlos.
Got it. Thank you.
If a team is accepted into the program, are all the founders required to attend the speed run, or what about like the non-technical founders?
Yeah, so we define founders as those who have like 10% of a company. They can, not everyone has to, at least one founder should be able to go and attend. And the more important thing is you would want to attend because you can get a lot out of it. But we understand like things are busy. If you're like trying to do XYZ, it's important to kind of focus on your company. But part of it is, yes, it is required to have certain individual like founders attend the San Francisco kickoff, the LA demo, and then to participate in the group office hours as well as the practitioner Zoom, the practitioner sessions, and probably watch some of the videos too.
Okay.
I know it sounds like a lot, but honestly, you can watch it at 2x speed too. So it's like, you know, I'm happy to send you guys the Chrome extensions to watch YouTube at more than 2x speed if you'd like.
Oh, okay. Is this like a remote session, the speed run?
Some of the speakers are remote, so you can do the async. But the actual practitioner sessions and the group office hours are actually synchronous. And you'll be just interacting with me the whole time. So you'll be like, hey, Andrew, this is not working. Like, can you make this work? You know, whatever it might be. Like, I'm here with you the whole time throughout the whole month. So you want to spend more time with me. I hope I've been entertaining. If not, I have other partners who are way more entertaining and interesting. So I hope that my performance is not indicative of speed.
One more quick questions. Are those that accepted required to move to San Francisco or the Bay Area?
However, if you do want to relocate and spend time in San Francisco, we will provide office space at A16Z in San Francisco. We will, however, not provide housing during that particular period. But it's nice because then you can be there for San Francisco Tech Week, which happens at the last week of May. And then there's an LA Tech Week, which is at the beginning of June, when we'll fly, folks. So
great option.
Yeah, it's kind of nice if you want to, you know, I tend to think that like you want to be around people who are like you. So that's helpful.
And Andrew is very helpful with real estate and rentals, so he can also help you on that, even in recent horror. That's a backstory. So very quickly, Tabish has this question: when to expect interview, call, email if selected? When would you get back to people by?
Very quickly. So we would actually get back to you. The deadline is Friday. Apply earlier if you can. We're going to get back to people tomorrow for some initial scheduling of interviews, as well as for any additional information. And then on Friday itself, we're going to be working hard we're going to speedrun this. We're going to do this over the weekend. And we're going to get back to folks and be like, look, like schedule a time, a very quick sort of 15-minute interview session. And we want to make it as low cost to you as possible, because it's honestly like, it is an honor for us to be able to speak to you and to be able to go ahead and hear kind of what you're thinking about and what your dream is. And we want to be able to go ahead and make it so that it's easy for you to be like, okay, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to go to San Francisco and see what's going on. And I'm going to participate in this thing.
So Andrew, my final question is targeted for people who want to watch this later, who never thought of launching a gaming startup, people who very strong technically, people who love building companies, perhaps people who will also be impacted by more layoffs happening at Facebook this coming week. If they watch this and they say, well, I want to try this, but I have no background in gaming. Can you talk about why this is the most awesome time to try something in the gaming space and why they should actually be interested in this?
Yeah, I'm not going to try to. Well, one of my other partners is actually going to have a tweet thread on this, so I'll send it out to Chris so he can go and send it out to folks. But there's three things that are happening in the world of gaming that are really exciting. One is obviously the world of AI allows the cost of production to greatly decrease. People might remember that more than a decade ago, it was very expensive to actually make a website, right? HTML code was actually made by hand, right? Like Yahoo was Jerry Yang actually linking actual websites. And the web was actually fairly small at that time period. And it was expensive to go ahead and get an engineer or to be able to do anything technically. Then came the world of object-oriented programming, the ability to go ahead and do not just sort of dedicated servers, you could be able to go into cloud infrastructure, and then you could be able to spin up a website very quickly. We think that there is something that's happening in the world of deep consumer content like games that's happening right now. And that means that the cost of production is greatly decreasing. And that means that if you had the idea to go and create a game, you can make it, right? There's a number of people basically showing that you can make Flappy Bird using ChatGPT, and you can do that. You can actually make Flappy Bird, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, right? Like you can just do it, and as a solo developer, it would have taken a lot longer, but you can actually make it fairly quickly now. That is a huge leap in the ability of production. In addition to that, though, you also have two other things that are happening. One is you also have platforms that already have install bases, whether it's platforms like Roblox or Fortnite, for example, to be able to deploy your game. That means that you have an easy area of distribution. And then the very last thing that's important is you have access to capital, where late stage investors have started moving earlier because it's cheaper to go ahead and create some of these games. And then in addition to that, there's more gaming investors now out there than have ever occurred in the past. And the reason why is because if you think about it, right, for a period of time before the web occurred, people were like, well, the web's primarily only for like newspaper outlets, right? But then afterward, people were like, no, like it's a great place for like interactive websites. You can have email on there. You can actually have ways to search for pieces of information. You can even find map directions, right? And we think that like that depth of interactivity will increase. And because that will increase, that necessarily lends itself to the world of VR, AR, games, UGC, mods, Web3, block, like all these layers of the stack really kind of come to a confluence that's happening right now. And it's exciting because you're already seeing it, right? Like Fortnite is one of the most popular destinations on the planet. Most people wouldn't think about it that way. They're like, well, it's a game, right? No, but you don't understand, like billions, like on Fortnite. And that is something not easy, that's not easy to go and scoff at. And I think that there's a lot of interesting patterns or things to be learned about that fit folks who come from the tech industry. And then more importantly is for us, Speedrun is, this is our first time doing it. It's our inaugural run. We hope to be doing more of these in the future because we just care about basically helping combination of the pipeline for the industry, but just generally folks in the industry to understand, to kind of like crack open and make the industry less opaque and more transparent. Awesome. Andrew, any final words? Apply by this Friday, April 21st, people. It's very short. At max, you'll take 30 minutes, probably less than that. but we'd love to go and hear from you, and feel free to go ahead. And I think you all have my email, but feel free to go and send me an email if you have additional questions. But I look forward to going and meeting every single one of you. And more importantly is, I just appreciate that folks took the time out of their day. I know that it's crazy what we do every day to be able to go ahead and try to make creativity reality, but that's what we try to do at A16Z Games at the very least. So this is just one of the many things that we try to make useful to a lot of the great builders who are out there.
And final important question: who should be the reference, Andrew? Should it be you or?
I guess you could use Chris. You can also just use the Zoogler network. I mean, like if it's all the Zoogler, if it depends on how much you love Chris, but you can definitely put him down as a reference. And then if he does super well, then he obviously might get a mechanical keyboard. But most importantly is don't worry. You might be thinking to yourself like, oh, the refer gets a bunch of cool swag. I promise you, you will also get some really cool swag if you're let in as a speedrun participant.
On that note, Andrew, thanks so much for staying behind, chatting to all of us and everyone from all around the world. Thank you for joining this Zoogla chat with Andrew Lee. Good luck with speedrun. Can't wait to hear more about it, Andrew.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you so very much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.